putting the X in success. The road to resilience. New beginnings with new Pangea. Hosted by Ravi Pankhania from Pluxee UK. With guests Rob Murray and Jack Biss from New Pangea.
Hello and welcome to the Pluxee UK podcast. My name is Ravi Pankhania, Head of Digital Marketing, and today I'm joined by the founders of New Pangea, Jack and Rob. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Ravi.
Thanks
Great
for
to be
having
here.
us.
Yeah.
No problem. Pleasure is mine. So I've actually been fortunate enough to see you guys live in action. You guys came over and did a workshop at the Pluxee UK HQ in Milton Keynes. And I wanted to share some of those benefits and those experiences with our wider audience and our listeners. When we think about health and well-being, and with stress in particular, I think we all hope for that kind of magic wand, right? That wand that will help remove all of these challenges that we're having. And it's kind of easy to implement. It doesn't require any training. It's accessible by all. In reality, that wand doesn't exist. But what we do have are these toolkits, these resources, these products, solutions, and most importantly, people, right? And if we use a combination of those, we're able to navigate through this complex ecosystem with a little bit more ease, rather than going into detail and being bogged down by the science and by statistics. Is just to have a conversation. There's a lot that we can all learn just from the background of New Pangea. So if you guys could give us a little bit of an introduction, how did you come about New Pangea and where it is today?
The short version is Jack and I met when we undertook a challenge to row unsupported 3,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean over Christmas in 2021 into 2022. We'd not met before that. We come from very different backgrounds. My background is policing. I was a police officer for just over 17 years and loved that career. But I experienced the effects of stress for any number of reasons that caused me to reflect and decide on a career change. And part of that, leaving the police, meant that I was struggling a little bit for identity and my confidence was fairly low. So I decided the best way to resolve that was to row across the Atlantic Ocean unsupported, having had no experience of ocean faring. I didn't even know the difference between port and starboard on a boat.
I don't think any of us did.
No.
Yeah, I'm not a police officer.
Yeah.
Wasn't in that space. I'll apologise for going any further. My hay fever is terrible at the moment. I sound like Darth Vader. So, but yeah, I was in construction for 17 years. Wow. So grew up and brought up in a completely different environment.
Yeah.
But not dissimilar to Rob, where the environment I was raised, as it were, and who I was surrounded by, there was a lot of stigma attached to it. You know, in policing and in construction, you know, big hairy ass builders is a term often used, and you know, that kind of don't show your emotions, don't show your feelings, don't show any signs of weakness. You know, stress is, I'm not bothered by stress. And that's in like a day to day. Following that, the higher up the chain you get, I suppose, stress is then branded as a badge of honour. I'm so stressed, I must be of a certain level of importance, or I must earn a certain amount of money. And I think everyone's just going through day to day with no active thought process, often in survival mode, which is something that stress itself puts you into. You know, when you're in a heightened state of emotions, you know, and again, Rob is far more up to speed on the science aspect from me, and I'm sure we'll go into it, but they're just functioning day to day. It's easier to keep going on the path you're on. The idea of change is stressful in itself rather than what the change may bring. So yeah, I've found myself in a situation where I've loved doing challenges, whether it's on foot, on a bike, you know, carrying weights, whatever it may be. I love it. I love the way that it brings me to be present, the sense of achievement. And so when an opportunity came around to do something that scared me, something that was bigger than me, bigger than us, you know, often, like we say, we're not seafaring. We've never been at sea, didn't know port starboard, you know, never navigated, never seen waves as big as what we saw. I love the idea of maybe achieving something bigger than, and the analogy, I love stories for my kids, for my grandkids. I want to show there's a different path, break the norm, break the stigma. So there's a lot to unpack for me in that. And I didn't set out to discover about myself or make a change in my life. I think I took the opportunity and it kind of served as a reset. And I think I've learned a lot about myself thereafter the challenge than I didn't think I'm going to do that and I'm going to achieve this or I'm going to change that about myself. I think as time's gone on, it's just organically happened. And I've loved the process. You know, not all bits. I'm not saying it's all been not roses, but There's been certain parts that have been really challenging, and even now, you know, the level of discomfort you feel in a certain situation.
Yep.
But overall, the level of growth and awareness of myself and a new passion that started for us to help other people go through similar journeys.
Just to go back on when you mentioned on the construction side, right? You mentioned that there is this stigma attached, and there is this almost, you know, bottle everything up, right? What were the impacts or experiences that you've had where people have bottled things up, and where things have got to a stage where actually if they just reached out, or if there were the right tools and the people in place that we spoke about were readily available, that it could have kind of helped them?
As time's gone on for me personally, and obviously I can only talk subjectively, my own experiences, I'd say when I first started off, the level of awareness was low. The resources were probably lower, but they probably did exist in some form or another, but it was a little bit perhaps woo-woo. Also, people didn't know where to look, but it was kind of, you just crack on. You saw people who were, you know, a tendency to drink too much at the weekends or during the week. You know, people who rocked up late on a Monday morning, you know, because they've not turned up on a Monday, and it was just a thing. You know, there's a lot of aggression sometimes on sites, you know, different situations, and through over nothing. Something really kind of ordinary would happen, or a little change, and also someone would react way out of proportion. And you just be like, oh, John's a bit fiery today. You know, or, oh, no, that's just how he is. And you think, well, and at the time you didn't think, oh, what's going on for John outside of home? You didn't ask how he was doing. It wasn't a thing. As time's gone on, resources have crept in. We're definitely in a different space to what we were. Every day, 2 people die by suicide in construction.
Wow.
And every day, you know, that's tomorrow, day after. And that's an average nationally. You're 6 times more likely to die as a result of your mental health than you are from having an accident on a building site.
Wow.
So a lot of money and emphasis has been put on, and we use the analogy, you know, you protect someone when they're going up on a roof, there's handrails, there's harnesses in place, you've got the right training, the right people, right supervision, you've assessed all the risks, but have we put as much emphasis on someone jumping off the top of the roof? And no, you know, that's not where
powerful.
It needs to be. So
and communication is so key, right? Just to be able to ask those questions. So was he all right, or have we often say how are you, but do we actually have time to actually
passing,
ask?
Isn't it?
It's just a passing comment.
It's like I all feel the need to ask how you doing, and language is a different thing. There's lots of different languages, lots of different backgrounds in construction. You know, European workforce labour from multitude of different places, and they've got their own cultures, the way they deal with things. You know, some people are open by nature, some people are closed by nature. Everyone's different. So when you were saying about framing resilience, it's so individual. You know, there's an industry, you know, police and construction, just from our experiences, there's an industry norm, and then there's what it actually means to us. And since becoming a dad, that's changed for me a lot. I used to think it was about being hard, doing every training, pushing harder, lifting more, going further, you know, achieving that level. And actually for me, resilience is, and what we define it from New Pangea, is your ability to overcome an obstacle and do that sustainably. That really sunk in for me when my son was born.
Well, Jack and I are slightly different age, you might have noticed, from very different industries. But there's a lot of parallels in how we felt. So my experience in policing was really similar to that. Sleep was pretty awful. I was a shift worker. Very often I'd eat food from the only place that was open at 3:00 in the morning, being a 24-hour petrol station. Culturally, we drank alcohol more than perhaps was healthy. But the first things I started to notice was my irritability, my ability to tolerate other people, for want of a better term. And at the time, because of that stigma that was probably self-imposed, so it's not necessarily one that said around me, is it doesn't happen to people like me. I'm far too resilient for stress or mental health to be an impact on me, which meant I just sort of dug deeper in. That kind of developed into procrastination. I would not do tasks that were really quite important to be done because I didn't want to do them. And then I think probably, without the benefit of hindsight, the time I realised something was really wrong is when my short-term memory evaporated and I couldn't remember people's names in meetings and people that I'd worked with for years. That was when I decided that I needed to get some assistance and got some counselling and went and saw my GP. And actually, that was then the journey of when the rowing across the ocean really started, was to seek the validation that I was still capable of the things I thought I was capable of before feeling unwell.
What would you say to people that are a little bit reluctant to give that olive branch, to first seek that help? because a lot of the times you're in denial. Am I looking for help? Or do I need help? But it's also like, where's the first starting point that someone could potentially do for themselves? Because when I reflect on it, if you can, I think fix is the wrong word, right? But if you can heal and support yourself in the correct way, you can support the masses, right? You can support others around you, right?
Absolutely.
And if you look at it from a workplace perspective, you can take that mindset and really empower teams. You can empower people.
That acknowledgement piece is really important. And I wasn't prepared to acknowledge it. And actually a colleague did that, reached out and said, is everything okay? This is the number for the EAP. If you give them a bell.
Okay.
And that's what started the ball rolling for me, which was, and I'm eternally grateful to that individual. And then I felt I was able to go home and speak to my wife about it. And I was in a senior leadership role within the organisation I worked in. So then actually that example that I then set around vulnerability and saying, actually, I'm not really that great at the moment, if I'm honest, was really important. It gave validation to other people. But I think write it down, say it out loud. You don't have to say it to anybody, but just acknowledge it.
I'm one to go down a rabbit hole. So something will happen, and in my head it will spiral, keep going down whichever path, and then through no change or something happening, I'll end up at worst case scenario. And that's just the way you're wired. And so if someone else is feeling like that, the idea of the change is far scarier than the change. It's never as bad as what you think it will be.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I'll try and instill the confidence to someone that whatever you're thinking, it's never going to be that bad. The second one is, acknowledgement. How am I sleeping? If I'm still for 5 minutes, do I reach for my phone? Can I actually sit with my own thoughts? But I think it's really important what we said earlier. It's not a fixed situation. No one's broken.
Yep.
Everyone is just functioning, and it's their body and their mind putting coping mechanisms in place to help them survive. Because they're perfectly evolved to do that from a biological standpoint, right?
Yeah, correct.
So there's nothing wrong. We're all just working through and dealing with our own thing. There's no one solution fixes all.
Yeah.
I think it's a happiness thing as well. How happy are you? And deep down if you're enjoying
It's a
things
tough
or
sentence,
not.
that. How happy are you? Or are you happy? Right?
Yeah.
It's a really difficult
Yeah, it is really difficult
to say it and even to answer it.
I sometimes used to say that when I was in the first part of my policing career, I used to sing along to the radio on the way into work. I was so excited about what I was going to see when I got into work, because every day was different. I really got on great with the people that I worked with, and I felt I was having an impact. And one day I was driving on a dual carriageway, and I arrived at static traffic, bumper to bumper, and I was relieved because it delayed my arrival at work. And that, I think, was a significant moment for me to say something really significant has changed, and was part of my sort of acknowledgement to myself that I'm not the person I was a little while ago.
Yeah. But stress is, I know it's different for everyone, comes in small boxes, big boxes, different shapes, sizes, forms. Emotional, physical stress is a state from adverse circumstances. So I think there's two things there. One is that it's not the external event that causes you stress, it's your interpretation of it.
Yep.
So, that thing happening is what you think, whatever. Because, again, you see people who are under the same pressure or the same thing happens, they react very differently.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot in that.
That's the powerful bit, because that you are in charge of your reaction, right? And whether it could be stress, it could be anger, it could be any emotion, right? You are in the driving seat, and you need to. But that's where the training and the learning and the culture comes into it quite a lot. And I think when we talk about, like you were mentioning, going into the workplace, you were recommended the EAP side of things, but you can easily be recommended a tool or a solution.
Yeah.
But that in isolation isn't enough, right? And it's like how in workplaces now they're getting to a kind of a state where they'll now offer a well-being room, right? For example, it shouldn't be isolated to a room. The workplace should be that safe space, right? And if you change it from the culture perspective and combine it with EAP, with some of these financial well-being products, these physical well-being products, mental well-being products, and combine it all together. And I think as part of New Pangea, you guys have got some principles, right? That you guys, and I think we're all very aligned in how that works. But it kind of needs to be embedded from the core. The one thing I wanted to touch on is at Pluxee, we all got trained on the insights discovery kind of piece, which is like a psychometric model, and it basically every single member of the company went through that training analysis type thing. At the end of it, we were really able to see how the organization is made up, right? What colors everyone was, and what that allowed us to do, not only from a from a management perspective, but from our day-to-day interaction perspective. So if we know that you're, Jack, you could be a red, just picking on your t-shirt, and Rob, you could be a blue or a green, right? So I would know that, when you have some of these adverse reactions where you're a bit angry, you're a bit short, right? That might get the job done in the interim, in the short term.
Yeah.
But long term, the lasting impact of that to that person can have some impact, right? And it can really disrupt your performance. And we always talk about performance through well-being, right? And totally. Having that communication, that transparency, but that's embedded from the core, right? We decided to do this across the whole business. If we just did it as a team or as an individual, that all falls apart. Yeah. And so I think the training is fundamental. But going back to from how you guys are going and visiting businesses, right? And having that, you could do a one-off workshop, or you could do something which is a little bit more long-term, a bit more sustainable. Can you just talk through how you guys would approach businesses, what you're suggesting to them to have that long-term impact?
We think it's really important that organisations have some sort of understanding of the well-being of their workforce. So we do some look around some of the data stuff. We measure levels of well-being within the organisations or teams initially, and then we go in and we sometimes use our story as a bit of a hook to say, this is really interesting. These are the things we learned that applied in a really, really tough, hostile environment and actually allowed us to thrive. We think these principles really apply to everyday life. We talk a little bit around some of the science and some of the current research, but we want to give every individual, whatever level they are in an organisation, the agency to impact their own sense of happiness and well-being. So the first thing we tend to advocate for is sleep.
First principle, sleep, the absolute bedrock of it.
Then movement. So actually, we need to move. An awful lot of careers nowadays involve you being a bit sedentary, driving a desk, but actually the benefits of movement, physical, mental, and all those things. And then what we put into our body. So fuel, hydration. We talk a little bit about alcohol, caffeine consumption, right the way through to gut-brain axis, and actually what I eat impacts the way I feel, keeping consistent blood glucose levels and avoiding that afternoon dip. We all get that, I need some caffeine and a chocolate bar to get me through the rest of the day. But actually that's probably a bit counterproductive. The thing we know so much more about post-COVID is how important our connections are and how we are a social animal. And again, a lot of people work remotely or in a hybrid way. How do they prioritise those connections on a daily basis? So reaching out to those people that matter, or having a really positive interaction with somebody that makes you a cup of coffee in the morning can change the way you feel. And then the final one, just some time for self-reflection. So, and that will look different for everybody. So, yeah.
And you guys did a lot of these principles all stemmed from the boat.
Yes.
The rowing that you did over the Atlantic. And there's actually, I know a lot more about what you guys had gone through in that boat from past experiences. But could you talk through some of the experiences that you've had where some of these bits were, where it kind of came to life, where you thought sleep was almost mandatory, right? The food is just as important, and all the things you mentioned, examples of where you've kind of had that arise.
I think the first part of the sleep for me, me and my wife, we had our son, and then 8 months later was the start of the race. So I thought, I'm in a good place sleep deprivation-wise to start this row. And then, the shift pattern we adopted on the boat, which is similar to most of the teams. Some do it slightly differently, judging on numbers and times. But it's the 2 hours on, 2 hours off principle. So you row for 2 hours, then you have a 2 hour off shift. And in that off shift, you do multiple things. You clean the boat, you eat your food, you check in with your teammates, you do your admin, and then you try and get as much sleep as possible. And it's almost like a race to bed situation, because that sleep is so vital. During the day, it doesn't happen so much because it's so hot. So at night, you kind of try and nail it in. But over the first few days, you're so fueled on adrenaline, and it's kind of just, you're making it through, and it's a whole new environment, this whole new way of living that you're experiencing. It's all new, exciting, adrenaline fueled, and stressful. I found it stressful, and that kind of manifested itself in a bit of a panic, a bit energy, as I suppose. So it's that acute stress. It was helping me, it was serving me at the time. So you kind of go through that, and the sleep, the lack of sleep, your empathy wavers, your lack of creativity comes to play. physically you start to break down because it's aids with recovery, right? And your mental thought process, you can kind of, that worst case scenario would maybe tail off a bit quicker than it would have done normally. But as time goes on, the adrenaline wears off, and because you kind of keep going, you don't change your shift pattern, you end up, your body just shuts off. And so at one point in about, if you haven't made it by a week, it's going to start happening where when you go to put your head down, I adopted breathing exercises, I know Rob did as well, just to kind of try and close off that mind-body connection, just to calm me down a little bit, and then I'd nod off. It didn't take long before I just put my head on the pillow and I was out. Because it needed to. The body was so exhausted. But so that's kind of how it started. And then, the other principles... Movement wasn't really an issue. We were moving quite consistently. Fuel-wise, we had to eat as much as we could basically get into our bodies. So we calculated on weight. I was the heaviest. So I was supposed to eat 5,500 calories a day. And I don't think I ever got close to that, because it's just freeze-dried food that you pour boiling water into, and it's repulsive. So that's nowhere near Michelin. No, it's bad. I'm sure they've come on since in the last couple of years, but and then refined sugars. So that carbohydrate piece, just to keep allow your body to keep moving. So that the row wasn't a great example of getting your 5 a day in. Certainly, the row is a really good example of just survival. Yes, short term. Everything about it and all these principles were. Rob often says that type of sleep you get 2 hours on, 2 hours off is the worst you can do. But over a short period of time, it was a race at the end of the day. So we're trying to beat other people in this adventure. It's a necessary evil. I did a video diary for my kids that they've never watched, which quite a lot of it is me sobbing into a mobile phone. And the only way I can describe it was missing my family felt physically painful. So I felt I was in physical pain, and something that really surprised me. I was not expecting to feel that way. Well, we advocate vulnerability as a strength. We don't want people to feel that they can't show the true selves. What I noticed when I came back onto dry land and went back into the corporate world and, back into construction, was if I showed a bit more vulnerability, if I wanted to actually sit down and have a conversation with someone, I got it back. So it's what you put out into the world, you get back. But it takes a lot of confidence, and we don't want people to go through a crisis to understand that. We want to share our story and our versions of events to say, mate, the best time to do anything is always now. But it doesn't have to be a huge life-changing event. It could just be that 1%, exactly what James Clear, Atomic Habits. If you could change someone by 1% every day, at the end of the year, you're 37 times better at doing that event.
Because everyone wants the big change, the big impacts straight away. But it's that you've got to go through the program, right? As with anything. Exactly. And success isn't, people say, overnight success, for example, but they haven't seen the 5 years previous of being up all night. So it's the 5-year overnight success. The same. If you want to change a habit or change, it's not going to be immediate. But also permission and forgiveness for yourself. Speak kindly to yourself. If you do something new, like adopt something from our 5 principles, if you pick one, for example, like the sleep or the movement or the fuel, social connection, self-reflection, to start, you're not going to be very good at it because you've never done it before. No one is an absolute professional or something they've tried for one time. So be kind to yourself. Give yourself that time to learn it, enjoy it. If you're going to enjoy it, it's going to likely repeat. Happiness levels go up, fulfillment goes up, meaningful, and it just grow over time. And when you're actually visiting a lot of these businesses, right? What are you seeing right now? We spoke about the climate. Right, and both the micro and macro stuff that's happening, the whole landscape is evolving, and you need to pivot and be quite agile and move with the times as well, right? Otherwise, you will become a little bit kind of stale, right? Is there a certain trend that you guys are seeing? And I know, we can assume it's going to be different on an industry basis, right? So whether you're on construction, whether you're in the police force, or in any of the corporate sectors. But is there a certain trend that you're seeing where people aren't having I think sleep and eating and all that it could be a starting point, but are you seeing that then they're deficient in certain areas, would you say? Construction is often unbranded energy drinks. You might see a lot around site, and it's for that quick fix, early starts in the morning, a long drive or a long commute to a site. You're then outside physically moving, requiring that energy. And then if you are up early, driven a long way, got to site, for example, or a project, had a quick hit of caffeine and sugar, you're fatigued already because you've been doing however many shifts on the bounce. Then you look for a quick hit of, it might be a burger and chips, it might be a fried breakfast, for example, and you acknowledge that. So I think the fuel side of things in construction is not helping the mental health side, the physical health, because
you're kind of hitting that immediate fix and need, but not the long term. So I'd say the trend in construction is the fuel side needs to improve, but also the communication. If there is a change in construction, the problem is it's not happening fast enough, and it needs to happen in a way that saves the people in the interim.
We really advocate that people are really deliberate about the habits they put in place. So what might work for one person might not work for somebody else. We're all really, really individual, but it's that being deliberate about things. So I'm gonna charge my phone in a different room to where I sleep. I'm gonna get to bed at the same time every day this week. It's that deliberate nature that I think we're missing, and it just means that their needs are being met. So I think that the reason, my theory around why incidents of mental ill health are increasing, symptoms of anxiety and depression are so prevalent, is we're just not having our needs met. And something that individuals can have agency over. So of course your employer, your family life, your environment has an impact, but individuals can have an impact on that too. Having a little period of reflection to say, how did I feel after that really poor night's sleep? Or actually, I connected with some friends I've not spoken to in a while, and it gave me a lift. And then prioritising those things that matter to you will give you that agency and have that impact.
Powerful.
I can't remember who mentions it, but sometimes just identifying what it is when you're stressed, give it a colour, name it, think about removing it from your body type thing. Like for me, stress manifests for me as like a hot flush. So I get a wave of like adrenaline. Then it's a knot in my stomach, like quite low down to the left. There's a knot and it sits there. I don't eat, and I'll go very quiet. And I'll go into myself. And I know that's not the same for Rob, for example. Like,
I will talk a lot, and I'll eat a lot.
Big thing as well, the stigma again, I suppose, stress. Not all stress is bad. There is a reason you.
Well, this is what I was going to say, is that you have to use it to your favour, right? And how can you use it to your positive? It sharpens your attention span, right? So if you can figure out what works for yourself and use it to your advantage, it's not, you can't always shy away from it. But again, it comes back to how you guys both understand each other's stress response. I think is powerful as well.
And the insight stuff, the colour stuff, it allows you to empathise with other people, to say, actually, when a red is feeling impacted, they may well exhibit these symptoms. And again, it's a generalisation, but actually, if someone I know, my boss I know is a red, and they say this to me in a meeting, I can actually say that isn't personal. That is them reacting because they're feeling some stress. So it's that empathy piece about understanding how others will react. And that might be the time, or it might not be, to say, everything okay? Do you want a coffee? Or a decaffeinated energy drink? Or, whatever. And actually, we speak to some organisations, and they've even got a bit of a plan around, I will exhibit these symptoms when I'm feeling impacted. And the way I'd like you to respond as peers or line managers is X or Y. I'd rather you didn't do this. So actually, that the power of the individual and the fact that we're all unique means that that actually one size is not going to fit all.
For sure.
So that nuance is.
And I think
really
as part of the training, the powerful bit was, as one colour, so say if I'm a red and other people are greens, it's not only understanding what their specific personality is, but it's about having that two-way understanding of, if I was, like you say, to exhibit a certain sign, then this is how you could then help complement it rather than clashing, right? And we all have polar opposites, but polar opposites can also work. I wanted to touch on one thing. We talk about resilience, right? And resilience often means different things to different people, and I think we touched on it slightly before. For those who are unaware of when we talk about resilience, how would you define it?
Resilience is simply the ability to navigate obstacles in a sustainable way. So big obstacles might mean stress is a real factor, and you're going to need to acknowledge that afterwards there's going to need to be a period of recovery, or 100% on a Monday is not the same as 100% on a Tuesday. Every day is different. It's that ability to overcome obstacles in a way that is not going to impact you into the future. The way we did things when we were at sea was we'd have a meeting every morning. It sounds very formal. We didn't take minutes or anything, but and we unless it was a safety matter, we would save up stuff that was bothering us for that meeting. And very often, the stuff that bothered you in your sleep-deprived, socially isolated state, by the time 12 hours has gone by, you think, oh, actually, this is not as big a deal as I thought. We can move on from that. Or, this is still bothering me. I need to tell Jack that the smell of his socks is really causing me upset, or whatever the example might be.
And we were in different cabins, so...
It wasn't. Actually, one example was that Adam saved something, who was one of our crewmates, saved up for one morning meeting that I had to stop falling asleep while eating because he kept finding couscous in the bed. So, and I said, Adam, that is a valid concern and something I can imagine is impacting you. I will not fall asleep while eating again. So yes, those resilience pieces, how you choose to communicate those challenges, I think is really, really important.
Anyone out there that is struggling with a little bit of stress, is their well-being is being impacted, whether it could be mental, physical, financial. What would your 3 bits of advice be to them as a point to start from?
I think the first thing I would say is you're in great company. Lots of people are being impacted for any number of reasons. So you're not alone.
Be kind to yourself. Give yourself permission would be, for me, the second one. The amount of times you're hard on yourself because you want to achieve a goal, or there's a certain mindset you think you need to adopt, and I'm guilty of this. Again, I've got a very negative inner voice. And I think it's probably got me to some good places. It's kept me pushing. It's, that imposter syndrome, what if, but I'll just keep going, find out, of course you could do it, get on with it type thing. It will serve you short term and you can do some great things as fuel, but it's not sustainable. So long term, forgiveness and being kind to yourself, coupled with that, is critical. Otherwise, you're just going to end up being your own worst enemy.
Yeah, and I think the third one would be that, which kind of is an extension of what you said, is that acknowledgement piece. I'm going to acknowledge that actually I'm not 100%. And it might not be that you've tipped into needing to see the GP and get a formal diagnosis if that's necessary. It might just be that you're not 100%. And I'm gonna think about that, and I'm gonna and I have agency over that. I can do something to impact this, regardless of the external environment.
I also want to add to that, so I suppose number 4, but it's not number 4. It's also a massive opportunity. I know what we're talking about today is quite serious. It affects a lot of people. It's, in today's culture, the modern world, it's tough and there's a lot going on, and it is. But also, it's a massive point of opportunity. We often now in our work, what we do with companies, how we are, we want people to see it as a point of, we want to inspire and empower people to take that agency. And it's, something you could grab, something you can learn from, you can grow from, you can educate yourself. There's nothing keeping you in the way you're doing things. Now, I know there's obviously, you have to be pragmatic and you have to be sensible and those type of factors are at play. But the little things you could do, try something new and seeing how it makes you feel. Picking up a new sport, going to a new social setting, taking yourself out of the environment, going for a walk at lunchtime, trying a new food, speaking to someone you haven't spoken to in a while, pick up the phone to a family friend. There's all these things that they're huge and they can have such a big impact, and you just don't know until you try it.
But we really, genuinely, honestly say that we're really average. We're really normal.
Thanks, Rob.
I usually say Jack's average. And we're really normal. But actually, you can achieve extraordinary things. And we say, slightly cheesily, and we might have stolen this off somebody else, is there's no such thing as extraordinary people. There's just those ordinary people that achieve the extraordinary because their needs are met, they're prioritising themselves, and then that, not only do they feel well, that's the point that potential is unlocked. And whether that be in professional, personal, sporting, whatever terms, that's when really the magic happens.
And I think that's what really resonated with us when you guys came over to the HQ in Milton Keynes is we were able to relate so well, right? And because we all come from different backgrounds, and not everyone's always been in the same career, so they've switched career paths and stuff like that. And I think everyone had a lot to reflect on. post that. And I hope our listeners and our audience can also get the same benefit that we had also. So thank you guys.
No, I love it.
We've also got a couple of, just so that our audience can get to know you a little better, we've got 4 cards here that I would like you to choose from with a small question in there for you to answer. So Rob, you can take first dibs.
Okay, thank you. If you were to compare your rowing partnership to a famous celebrity duo, who would it be? Oh, that's a great question.
Well, there was 4 of us on the boat to start with, but yeah.
Well, all 4 of us made it to the other end. I'd like to stress. That sounded like one didn't make it. We all got to the finish. So yeah, we were a crew of 4.
Yeah. But me and Rob are the only ones who
made out.
Kind of, there were some changes made, yeah, and then started new Pangea.
Yes,
so,
it's just the 2 of us. It's going to date me, whatever I say.
It's all right.
There's no judgment here.
Right, I'm going to go.
It will be afterwards.
Do you know, I'm going to go for a slightly comical one of Rodney and Del Boy. In the fact that actually I'm fairly quick to action, quick to talk, usually put foot in mouth earlier, and Rodney here is very much that calming influence.
Okay.
And tolerates me interrupting him and finishing his sentences for him.
Okay.
So
Not driver reliant.
I think you saved him at the end there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
so yeah, only fools and horses.
Okay, good.
Brilliant.
Jack?
Do you have a particular song or mantra to keep you going when times are tough? Yes. So it stems back, and me and Rob did this on the rowboat, on the stern cabin. We had some mantras fitted, some mottos.
Yeah.
So Rob had his, but mine was cheerfulness in the face of adversity. So if I'm going through a challenging time, or I think I am, or the environment doesn't suit, or it's a challenge physically, mentally, the cheerfulness side, I try and remind myself that it's about the journey and having a good time whilst you're doing whatever you're doing. And it really kind of brings me back to being present and making sure that you're having a good time, you're smiling, you're enjoying it. So if you can smile, it looks a bit odd, say, you don't want to be but it takes so much less effort. But that intrinsic, I'm smiling, I'm having a good time. So yeah,
wow,
cheerfulness with the face. And again, I think I've stolen that from an SAS or a Special Forces quote somewhere, but it's just the cheerfulness in the face of adversity.
Post-adventure, what's the habit from your rowing days that you still find yourself doing? Oh, that's a great question. I think the sleep bit. Sleep has always been one of the things I've really had to work hard at. So for months after finishing the row, I would wake up at every 2 hours.
Wow.
Other people get back into it really quickly, and even now I will wake in the night, and my go-to, if I'm really struggling, is to listen to Harry Potter audiobooks. Stephen Fry has a very calming effect on me. I discovered Mid-Atlantic.
Wow.
And to the extent my children can't listen to audiobooks in the car when I'm driving, because that would obviously not end well for any of us.
If you could have any celebrity you wish to narrate your rowing journey documentary, who would it be? I've got a few authors that I'm big fans of. And one of them is Mo Gaudat, ex-Chief Technical Officer for Google.
Yeah.
He's gone through a journey of himself, of quite a big life journey. But his mission now is to make 1 billion people happy, which that is huge. And he has a very calming influence on me. So yeah, I'd say Mo Gaudat, just because of his background, what he's about, who he is, but also I think, he's just got one of them.
Wow.
That'll Barack Obama, I think.
Okay, so if Mo, Barack, or Stephen Fry are listening, we need them to reach
we're
out.
available.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. Whether or not, well, it doesn't say him rowing. Maybe I could, Mo, if you fancy rowing across the Atlantic, I'll go with you.
Just read out all his catalogue.
Yeah, or you could just be my narrator. That'd be fine whilst I do the rowing.
Good. So thank you, guys. This has been a great episode.
Thank you.
Rob, Jack, thanks for coming down. And if anyone wants to get in touch, we can have a look at the description and you can find more information there. We will have many more episodes, no doubt. So watch out and watch this space. Thanks for listening. Join us next time, putting the X in success.
Join us next time to discover how Pluxee UK is putting the X in success, enhancing employee engagement and making work not just a place to be, but a place to belong.